All right, everyone, welcome to this episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital. I'm your host, Will Christensen, and I have Tyler Jefcoat. He actually is one of the very first episodes we ever recorded back in 2023, and he did a great job. So we're having him back here for our second season while we fish for nuggets and share some wisdom. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Will. Glad to be here, buddy.
So Tyler and I go way back. And Tyler, I don't know if you can remember which story you shared back on your first episode. And it could be, if I went back and looked at that episode, that you didn't share a story. So we're going to ask you this question. When's the
Okay.
first time you can remember monetizing your mental capital?
Yeah, that's a weird way to word the question, like in an intentional way. So I think honestly, the gosh, okay, let me tell you that the first time I remember this is I was a mid-level manager at a bank and was learning a lot of stuff about building things, some from prior work experience, some from just being the kid that would always connect my friends to do stuff. Like I don't know if like anyone else was like this, but like way back before technology and cell phones, somebody in your neighborhood had created a sheet of paper with everyone's phone number on it, so you could like get a frisbee game or football game together. That was me. And so I was a disgruntled middle manager at a Fortune 100 company that was going through a grad school program and had the opportunity to use that experience to build a company back in 2012. And I think it's the first time I remember that wasn't nearly as like maybe visceral an example as more recently when I sold that company and started the one that I was working on over the last 6.5 years, where literally the process of failing as an entrepreneur and then figuring it out gave me the road rash and the scars and the skint needs and the knocked out front teeth to come in as a second time entrepreneur and actually leverage that expertise to help other people, make more money, make better choices than I had made.
Love it. I love it. So tell me, as you consider, your journey and where you're going, um, what would you what advice would you give to someone who's just beginning that journey?
Well, I think the first advice is I love entrepreneurship. It is hard. As you know, anyone who's listening to this who like resonated with what Will just said, there's almost nothing lonelier than like
Oh
having the
yeah.
courage to cut the umbilical cord of a job, and then you're sitting in a coffee shop or next to a cardboard cutout of Darth Vader, like Will and I like we were,
Oh yeah,
and
for a long
you're
time.
sitting with a laptop and a phone, and you don't even have a brand yet, and you're like, what did I just do? I'm here. And so that's just know that I sold a company that had made some success, launched my second company, and even the second time it was just as lonely as the first time. It's just not easy. And so I think the advice I would give you is be ready to have days when you want to quit and don't. And then the second advice is if you haven't already read any of the Eric Ries stuff, like Lean Startup, I think that's
Mm.
probably a start, because I think for me, actually, that's maybe other than loneliness, the second hardest thing was kind of figuring out who my customer was, like regardless of which business it was. It's like, all right, I remember hearing the drone of my mentor's voice in the back of my head saying, Tyler, there are riches and niches. Find something so finite that you can be the best in the world at solving the problem.
Mm.
Then once you actually start calling people, and Will, by the way, Will and I were in like cubicles next to each other trying to start. Like you're dialing for dollars, and you're like, oh man, I will do your laundry, I will shine your shoes, and I'll do the accounting for you, and I'll do your automation, and I'll watch your kids, and I'll bathe your ailing grandmother. Whatever you need me to do, I will do for you. And then when you realize as your company grows a little bit, or at least I did, is eventually you have to continue to get more and more and more narrow so that you can actually get good at doing something instead of doing a bunch of things poorly.
Uh yeah, could not agree more with you. Riches in the niches was something I always was afraid of missing out. I
Right.
was like, if I don't do that for them, like that could be a totally new business brand. And I found that my entrepreneur in me was like, but we could do that and we could do that. And there was just this part of me that was like really interested in leaning into that. And I had to learn to tell him, like, okay, you can get some entrepreneurial energy. Yes, that's good. But I need you to do it in a way that systemizes this business.
Mhm.
that doesn't open a new line of business every time we get a new customer that asks, "Hey, do you do this?" Yeah, could not agree more. That was one of the big mistakes I made in data automation, and one of the reasons we shifted and had to move things around was because we lost money on the new types of business we were trying out, and we
Yeah.
learned a lot. But man, was it painful.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So you're talking about like for people who are just starting out, it is painful because when you decide to be focused, it means you have to say no, but just not just any no. You have to say no to money. Somebody wants to send you money, and you have to tell them, "Wow, you know what? We actually just don't do that. I'm so sorry. Here, let me send you to my friendly competitor that does that thing." And that's a really hard thing to do. And this kind of goes back to maybe one more comment I would make about the person just starting out, Will, is you have to decide whether this is a hobby or actually a business. And so, like, I want to
Ooh,
give you permission. If you're out there listening to this, I want to give you permission to just try stuff. What is it? Who is it? Jim Collins talks about firing bullets before you fire cannonballs. Like, try,
amen.
like, put things into the world and see if they stick and and then have the like courage at some point, maybe it's a couple months down the line, to like really stress test this thing to be like, is this a hobby? Maybe it's not even fun, maybe it's just nothing, or is this actually something that needs to evolve into a business? And once you decide it needs to evolve into a business, there are some things you got to do, right? You're going to have to adult the way you're managing data. You're going to have to learn probably how to maybe lead a team or a set of vendors, partners at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And and anyway, at that point, you can expect to make money. But I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I've talked to, Will, who are like, yeah, I'm going to do this side hustle and I'm only going to work 2 hours a week and I'm not going to, and it's just going to print money for me because it's just going to scale in perpetuity. And I'm like, wow, that sounds awesome. I really hope that works for you. But most of the time, it's not like that. Most of the time, it's like, oh God, I've grinded for a year. And at some point, this thing needs to start paying me. And I'm going to have to like, I'm gonna have to get better at some things because I keep getting it wrong. And I thought it was going to go this way. I mean, it's just,
Yep.
it's just harder than you think. And yet I would just say it's still really rewarding.
Oh yeah, 100%. All right, Tyler. Camera glitchers aside, now that we've got you in your new angle, same office. Here's the question: imagine you're in a coffee shop with a friend who's just got started on Amazon. So this person's like, I'm doing a couple $1,000s a month. Which of these areas do you think you could help me with? Is the question he's asking. So imagining he's sitting across from you. It's an old college roommate, right? Like this is a good buddy. So you're gonna try to help him as best you can, right?
Sure.
The last guy who was on the podcast was like, man, that guy milks for all like he asks for all the questions.
Right.
So the questions that he wants to know: do you know anything about product launches, reviews, product listings, advertising, or preparing or scaling or selling the business? Do you know anything about any of those things?
Well, I've touched a lot of those. I think the scaling and preparing to sell are probably the ones because, yeah, listen, guys, once you're an accountant, always once. I'm kind of finance boy. So, yeah, those will be the ones I'd like to lean into.
Okay. All right. All right. So diving into that side of it, what mistakes would I be making that you think I might be able to avoid as I just get started here? Like, obviously I got a couple $1,000s a month. It's not it like speaking to what you said earlier, hobby
Right.
or job or real business, right? Because that's kind of how it evolves, right? It starts as a hobby, becomes a job because you're, like the lady baking pies and the E-Myth, and it's a job. It owns her, right? And then eventually it becomes a business and it's something that it's a system, and the system is what makes that money instead of you making that money. So tell me, if I'm beginning that journey and I'm in that state of a couple $1,000s a month, what should I do?
I mean, this is such a fantastic question because if you guys remember, there are like 4 million of us out there selling on Amazon, and it really is the top 10% that make a great living doing it. And it's probably the top 1% that make a great, great living doing it. And so I think one question, again, kind of going back to the side hustle thing. Actually, let me do this. Let me say it this way. The biggest reason that any company fails, whether it's Amazon or a construction company, doesn't matter what it is, the most important reason is that the amount of capital needed is more than the founder thinks it's going to be. And so the expectation is, well, if
Mm.
things go my way, 6 months from now, I'm going to be, Scrooge McDuck swimming in piles of coins. And almost every single time, the amount of energy or inertia or cash needed to start a business is just more than we predicted. And the result of that is, anyway, I just want to encourage you. Hey, you're just starting out, you're getting into this thing. Be reasonable and realistic with what you expect this business to do. I had I literally, this is, by the way, I was talking to the guy that's at the helm of a large, kind of private equity funded business a couple of months ago. And it still was hard to convince him, hey, buddy, you
Mm.
can't distribute. Like, let's imagine we have a pool and it has 100K in it. It's sitting in our pool.
Yeah.
You can't give that 100K to the owners, use that 100K to double the business, and use that 100K to make sure you don't run out of inventory. You can't, that each dollar can only have one job at a time. And so I think as you're planning for your
Mm.
business, realize that you're going to have to stretch your cash crazy, crazy far. And so to kind of get to the scaling thing, if you're at 2K a month in revenue, let's just say, for instance, my advice to you is to be very careful not to spend any of your precious capital on anything that's not crucial. Like, listen, you're a CEO and your one job is to find a path to profit, a path to revenue that has a profitable end to it.
Mm.
Once you get there, there's other problems you got to solve, and you may have to invest a little bit of that precious cash into hiring someone or building some systems or hiring an outsourcing.
Mm.
But when you're 2K a month, nope. You need to be doing it yourself. You need to be doing it on the cheap. You need to be doing it as simply as possible. And by the way,
Mm.
I've got a guy that owns a 8-figure Amazon dominant business, good friend of mine, that he and his wife and like 6 VAs run this entire business. 8 figures.
I'm
Wildly profitable.
I'm not even joking. Like I think that one thing that I found to be fascinating about Amazon sellers is how far they can go on their own.
Yeah.
An e-commerce business is really fascinating from a standpoint of volume and widgets and like systemization. A lot of businesses, they're high ticket, right? So you've got a 4 or 5 thousand, 10,000, $100 million price tag on the thing that they sell, and they've only got to sell two of them each year, and they're set, right? Like which the sales cycles, all sorts. There's all sorts of different challenges, and in the e-commerce space, I find over and over again, that average cart size of $25, and they walk away with 15% of $25, and you got to do that about a billion times to make a really profitable business. And because it is so transactional, um it's really interesting to see the ones who thrive in that systemization environment.
And maybe to that point, if again, if you and I are advising somebody who's just getting started, I think from pretty early on, trying to dream of ways to make your offering not just be transactional, like from really early on, dreaming of ways, how can I get that average order value up? Like I was talking to a guy today that has a $20 price point for his product. And he's got great margins, but he's really got to be creative to try to figure out how to sell 3 packs, 4 packs, 5 packs, because the economics on Amazon don't make a ton of sense
Mm.
you have to do any advertising on a $20 price point. And then to your point, Will, how can I develop a relationship? Can I have a subscribe and save element to this? Is there anything? One of my richest friends in the Amazon space, and this guy made a killing when he exited his company. He kind of sold this $500 unit that was great, but he really made his money on the like club. Like you needed a series of like parts and filters to run the thing going forward. And where he
Mm.
really made his money was driving traffic to this repurchased, like repurchase intent, recurring revenue model. And so anyway, from day one, I only have 2K a month in revenue. I'm trying to figure out if this product's even got teeth. I would love to have a vision and a dream of how I might be able to sell an accessory or sell something that's going to be recurring so that it's not just transactional. Because if I can own my customer, that's where I can really build a lot of value in the business.
So give me an example of, and let's say that I'm, I've discovered a new type of fiber supplement. And I've got a supplier that's, hooking me up, and it's all wholesale. We'll just say wholesale in this specific arrangement.
Okay.
Um, that's where I'm doing my 3K a month kind of situation. If I were trying to like accessorize or broaden, some of those things, and and I guess the other thing I'll say is, as soon as I was tossing out fiber supplement, um, I realized, wait a minute, that actually kind of has a subscription built into the product type. So like I didn't realize that, obviously. How should I be identifying products that allow me to own my customer like that?
Oh, and so this is a really good question because yeah, if you happen to be selling supplements, in some ways that problem's kind of baked in, like to the solutions there. Find a way to get people to subscribe and save with my monthly dose of whatever my supplement is. But for almost every other category, and you do have to be a little bit creative sometimes, but almost every other category, if you kind of think about it, this kind of goes back to the intellectual capital part of this, Will. I'll give you like a wild example. Like let's say you're selling an accessory for a high dollar grill. I have a friend that has some really nice like think like Yeti or Blackstone, one of these like nice grills, but the manufacturer didn't solve all the problems. And so you go to my buddy to buy the product that works better than the one that came with the grill. Ah, man, nothing has felt more transactional. I sold a daggum whatever light or tray or something like that. But if you really think about it, there could be a subscription to an intellectual product to then teach them how to grill or how to like cook stuff properly. There could be some
Ooh,
content or community around who buys the best steaks to put on their grill. I mean, and by the way, I'm not sure that that would even work in that business model. But my point is that we really need to be creative. We really need to find ways to
engage the customer.
that's right. To find what the real desire of the customer is and really push to solve that problem. You know, obviously, I'll give you another example. Somebody was selling, it's like a decorative piece that goes on a firearm, which is really hard to sell on Amazon, right? But you have this thing, he's got to be really slick with how he markets it because it's like a thing that makes your whatever look cool. Not a lot of repeat business there. But then he's like, wait a minute, the same guy that wants to do this also might buy a snazzy pen. And so he designs a cool like pen. Well, guess what? The pen needs an ink cartridge refill every 6 months. And so like just be thinking that this kind of goes back to I can't remember Don Middler maybe wrote the book, but this idea of a brand story. Can I really get to know who the hero of my story is? Who am I actually selling my products to? And now that I've sold it to them, can I have some kind of a small insert or some kind of an offering to sell them
Mm,
something else that they would also love?
interesting. So this actually, I think I did this on accident with my entrepreneur's apprentice business. So like
Okay.
I got out there with this idea I was going to clone entrepreneurs because I needed somebody who cared as much as I did about the businesses that I was building. But I didn't want to build them alone. And so
Right.
I went hunting for this idea of creating a clone. Well, I brought on these individuals and I started helping them connect those dots, but I started seeing other problems that those entrepreneurs were facing. And I was like, oh, I know how to solve that. I went to a mastermind and a lot of other people told me what I was doing wrong. And it was super helpful. So we started a mastermind. And then we were like, oh, you know what? A lot of these guys need help with sales, like SDR kind of training. And so we
Mhm.
started doing group coaching around SDR training. And then it was like, oh wait, automation is something that they're all trying to get their arms around,
Yeah.
this idea of, which AI tool should I be using? And so we included that in there as well. And the value's gone through the roof as we've almost created a community of entrepreneurs. And I did it basically by accident because in the beginning it was just staffing. We were just there to support in the staffing journey, which was a fair amount of value, but
Yeah.
it really makes a difference when you can start to solve some of the other problems. Someone I was on a call with someone, I was telling them about this, and they're like, "Oh, that sounds like Alex Hermosi. Solve a problem that gives your customer the problem you solve." So he said you're solving problem A, go find problem B that when you solve it creates problem A.
Hmm.
And go figure out a way to become part of the customer journey. And so, if you're out there, let's say that you're selling toothpaste, well, as soon as that toothpaste starts really working, well, then maybe it's time to go look at braces because
Right.
now that the teeth are really clean, there's an opportunity to straighten them. So I think it's very
Yeah.
interesting to understand that customer journey.
Yeah, and it takes effort. And I think this is you talk about common mistakes. I think there's a really large set of kind of noob Amazon sellers that kind of believe that Amazon creates this veil, this insulation between me and my customer, and therefore I can just depend upon the algorithm to tell me I'm going to use a spreadsheet, I'm going to churn some data and be like, there's a keyword opportunity. Let me get into business. Here's the issue with that business model is that there are millions of Chinese, Russian, Indian sellers who can do it cheaper than you can do it and are better at churning that data than you are.
Yep.
And so, and this is humbling because I used to think like I'm a math guy. Listen, man, like my MBA focus is finance. Like I want to be able to do it with a math problem. And to your point, Will, I think what's been humbling for me and what I've had to learn is that there's no substitute for talking to your customers, finding a way to get in front of them and ask the question, what's bothering you? What keeps you up at night? What's bugging you?
So
And
it's
then,
it's
yeah.
super interesting that you say that, Tyler, like the
Okay.
talking to your customer thing. One of the things that I teach entrepreneurs and business owners in general is there is no substitute for cold calling.
Mm.
And it's the same thing that you're just describing. When you cold call, think about it. Like think about the last time you got a cold call. I don't know about you, but it happens to me like every day. When was the last time I actually picked up that phone? I can remember because 2 or 3 days ago I picked up that phone, and the guy was like, it was actually really funny because this is the way he got me to stay on the phone. He goes, "So this is a cold call, and I'm a founder, and I'm just trying to figure out how to get this thing sold. And could you? Can I have 30 seconds?"
By the
And I
way,
was
that's
like,
so authentic. I love that.
well, the thing that I loved about it was I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've been you. I have been you
Yeah.
so many times." And for me, I was like, "Okay, you got 30 seconds, go." And so he dives into his pitch. I think one of the things you he obviously had tried out, like I was probably his 100th, 1,000th. I don't even know
Right.
how many cold calls he'd made. But when I picked up that phone, he was able to test out, you know, can I find a way to connect with my customer to the point where they'll have enough empathy to continue listening to me for 30 more seconds, 30 more seconds, 30 more seconds until it turns into, where it goes. And the funny part was this guy, he continued to push. He was telling me about this. He was like, well, we do leads for agencies. And I was like, oh boy, I've heard like this one 1,000 times. And he made some pretty wild claims, like some pretty awesome like claims. And I was like, man, if this works, I gotta tell Tyler about it. I gotta tell
Right.
I was like, okay. And I said, you're gonna have to text me. I gotta go. And he kept talking because I wouldn't schedule a call with him right then. And I thought, man, you just lost all the cred that you gained there, because now when you text me, I'm going to remember that you didn't listen to the fact that I said I got to go.
Right.
But it was fascinating, the human interaction. Cold calling forces you to figure out which 7 words open the proverbial product door to a
Mhm.
further conversation, and which 7 words don't resonate with your customer.
Yeah.
There's no faster way to find
That's true. I really
the
love that.
value
I
of the
mean, it's
product.
again, nobody, you and I have both done our fair share of cold calling. I actually had a guy knock on my door today. So it's really funny you mention this because I normally ignore them. I'm a very disciplined, like if I don't know your number, I don't pick it up pretty much. And this guy knocks on the door and he's finally there's fiber internet in my neighborhood. I've been using old cable and they turned on today. I cannot tell you guys how much I didn't enjoy working with AT&T here like 10 years ago, and apparently it's a lot better. But this guy did a great job. Like, and I told him, I was like, listen, dude, I admire what you're doing here. I'm gonna give you some feedback. I'm gonna listen. He actually might get my business. So, but the point is that it takes courage. And I think you're right. You get the if you're looking for the shortest amount of time between something you say and getting feedback, somebody hanging up on you because you said, oh, okay, let me cross that one off. That one didn't work. Let me try a different pitch. Let me try something else.
So the thing that I've found is those guys won't remember. Like if they picked up once, they might pick up on another cold call. Give it 3 weeks, try them back with a new set of 7 words, and sound different enough that they don't recognize that you cold call them a second time. Sometimes they'll notice and they'll be like, why the hell are you calling me a second time? But what I found is same person, new 7 words, and they continued to stay on the phone. Instant product validation. Oh, okay, I'm on the right track here. And then as you begin to describe their problem and you connect those dots, all of
Mhm.
a sudden they're like, wait a second, this guy might actually fully understand my problem to the point where he could solve it. If
Yep.
that's true, I am willing to open my wallet. Right.
Mhm.
Like, and that's the other piece of advice I'd give everybody on product validation. Everybody and their dog will tell you, what an amazing product. This is so cool, until you ask them to open their wallet.
Yep.
And then it gets real. And so
Mhm.
the first 7 words opens that door. You start getting there and they're like, wow, yeah, that's really cool. How much does it cost? Oh, it's like $20. Like you can see the instantaneous value evaluation. This is what you do when you walk to the grocery store. You look at that milk on the shelf and you say, $3.50. I used to pay $1 for this stuff. Right. Like you look at it and you make that instant value judgment. Like, is the pleasure of drinking this gallon of milk worth my money that I'm
Right.
going to part with? And so ask them to open their wallet.
And by the way, so because we're talking to Amazon sellers here, I'm thinking about another important point I just want to make here really quickly is you start testing, maybe you're not doing cold calls, maybe you're doing your initial ad campaigns, you're testing your products on the marketplace, and you're getting some sales. I just want to encourage you, once you get a little bit of data, once you've fired some bullets, as Jim Collins says, go back and do the math. Like this is going to take a little bit of math nerd time from you, because if you're able to sell a product, let's say you're able to sell it at $10, and then you try to sell it for $20 and no one buys it. Like the market's giving you feedback that there is either there's something wrong with your offer, which by the way, often is the case, or the product itself just isn't solving a big enough problem. Here's the point. It is really important not to build a business that isn't a business that just sucks money. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday where they like sell a product like at flea markets. They go to places, they're like, oh man, we had the best weekend ever, Tyler. We sold 800 units, man. It was a killer weekend. I'm like, all right, well, tell me about your cost of goods sold. Well, no, no, no. Tell me about tell me about how much time. They spent 36 hours with two people in a truck driving across their state, spending 2 days working and then driving home. And at the end of the day, they made like $115, right? And so when you really stress test that model, they need to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, I either need to be able to make an offer that allows me to sell this for $38, or I need to be able to do it with only one body instead of two bodies, or I need to find a new business because this ain't one. And so you could do the same thing with your Amazon business and be like, okay, can I make better A+ content? Can I make sure that I'm brand registered and I have good product? Can I fix my keywords? I think can I make sure that my title is correct? Can I make my main image better? Do the things that are blocking and tackling to optimize.
Mm.
And then you can ask questions like, for instance, if I can't get my marketing budget, my tacos, my total advertising down below X%, then that is the market telling me that I do not have enough product here to make money on it. And it's time to try to start designing an alternative that's better.
Mm. So I love that. And I think that I'm going to run a scenario past you because I'm curious. So I personally have considered the idea of digging into this whole realm. My background is automation, 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 and then I moved into automate, delegate, eliminate, and I'm in the delegation phase right now. At Seller Labs, obviously, technology is all about that automation and those other pieces, and so I don't have direct experience as an Amazon seller myself. I
Mhm.
have experience automating hundreds of processes inside different e-commerce companies, large and small. Rolando Rosas of Global Tech will tell you we spent hundreds of hours automating the bejeebers out of his business to help him gain a competitive edge. And so I understand it intimately, but I've never taken that plunge to go look at that. And now we're talking about this whole product launch and cold calling. It makes me wonder, like, I wonder if there's an opportunity for me if I were to go, work with one of these guys who helps you build relationships with manufacturers in China and, like come up with some of these different products that I'm pretty passionate about. I'm confident I could design a better widget than what's there. I wonder if there isn't a validation phase there where it's like you buy 100 from the manufacturer and then you go knock on the doors in the neighborhood. Like if that's your ICP, could I knock on the doors in my neighborhood and just be like, hey, I'm, considering putting this on Amazon. I was curious if you ever used one of these. like,
Yeah.
like it's cold knocking, not cold calling, right? But I wonder, is there a way to validate that way?
I mean, so like part of the question is how do I get the most amount of learning and information with the least time lag and the least expense? And I will say that like what you're talking about will 100% work, especially like now, I mean, if you're selling like whatever, a piece of equipment for an industrial complex, probably going door to door in your neighborhood is not going to be very helpful.
Yeah, you
But if
might
you're selling
might
something
be
that
needle in a
households can
haystack
use and
there.
you're yeah, exactly. Like, but I think for an Amazon seller, like I can't remember which one of these, which product was it that Carbon 6 bought? Was it like a PickFu or something like that? Like, there's so many like
Yeah.
A/B testing tools that allow you to literally just engineer a main image and steal reviews and data from your competitors and get some initial like, ooh, I would like this better than the prevailing competitor.
Oh,
And
okay. So I have to just anecdotally mention Brandon Young. So this is the data dive guy.
yeah,
He was showing me some of the stuff that he was doing, and he was using AI to basically create, like fabricate the image of the product that he wanted to create. So this product does not exist, right? Like
I love it.
one has hinges and the other doesn't have hinges. It's a screw, right? Like it's got totally, and he used AI, like Mid Journey and some of these others, to create that Pikfu image. And then he took the top selling one that he found against his version that was totally fabricated and say, which
Right.
one of these would you buy?
Yep.
And he's validating, like, here are the things that people are complaining about, exactly like you're describing. And his stuff, he's like, the data proves it. Like if I use PickFu and I use these different tools, Seller Labs actually has an internal tool that also does A/B testing now. We've got a partner there who's helping us with that, and it's all fully integrated with the product. But that is totally possible,
Right.
and with AI, I mean, way more possible than it ever was before to test the concept before you ever spent a dime.
What I love about that is that like it again, what you're trying to do is get as much learning, as much information as possible with the smallest budget, with the least amount of time lag, and something like geeking out on AI. I mean, you could probably find somebody on Upwork for whatever, or hire one of Will's apprentices, right? I mean, you can do this with a relatively small budget and probably get better information quicker than if you were to go door to door. Although personally, there's no substitute to talking to people. So I'm on board with that thesis. If
Mm.
honestly, if it were me, like I'm trying to put myself in the position of the average entrepreneur, I would probably say, all right, here's going to be my penalty. I'm going to run 20 tests and try to get information. If I don't get enough validating information, the self-imposed punishment is that I'm going to have to go door to door with every
Ooh,
mailbox within a mile of my house. And I've got a deadline of the 31st of this month. Like I'm kind of a gamify kind of guy. Like,
I
you
like
know,
it.
use the tech available, but then make sure that you don't accept zero results. Because guess what? Successful people don't tolerate not getting the results. They go get it done, regardless of what it takes.
I love that. I love that idea of like, okay, here's the deal. I got to get 20 of these things validated in this way, and if I don't, then I got to go out and start selling and hitting all those. That's a really powerful way to self motivate. Okay, so shifting to our final two questions here for the episode.
Okay.
First question: if you could make a phone call back to that version of yourself that's just getting started, let's say it's right before he starts getting into that first venture that you sold.
Mhm.
If you can make a phone call back to him, and we're assuming that he's mature enough to receive this phone call and receive this advice, what piece of advice would you give him that might help him in his journey?
Okay. I love answering this question. And guys, by the way, you ought to go back and try to listen to whatever it was, episode 3 or 5, or whichever one I was on, because I'm pretty sure Will asked me some version of this question. I have no idea what I said 2 years ago. So you can call me out on the hypocrisy if I missed it on this one. But here's what I would do. If I could go back to 2012, call Tyler Jeffcoat, who was, late 20s at that point, I would say, Tyler, don't ever wait to deal with conflict with partners. That's the first mistake I made was I had some conflict and I was
Mm.
pretty naive and I believed that scaling the company. We ended up at 100 plus employees in that company that I sold in 2017. But ultimately, we both lost a lot of value because our partnership dissolved. And it ultimately, like he can be responsible for his part of it. For me, my part of it was that I felt pain in 2014 that I didn't bring up until 2016. And that's my fault. I got to take ownership for that. The second thing is I would watch our money a little bit more closely sooner. So when you're starting a startup, you guys know this, if you're kind of in the startup phase, you're going to have to place bets, and some of those bets are not going to work out, and that has to be okay. You have to have the courage to fire bullets and have them be bullets that feel like they're wasted. I just wish that I'd had the discipline to kind of look more closely at our numbers 6 months in than I did. And one of the reasons is that we ended up accumulating a little bit more debt than we needed to, and it created a lot more stress on the business than was necessary. And I'm an accountant. I had worked at a bank. I have a finance focused MBA. I've now sold two companies that were seven figures. And I almost crashed a business because I didn't know how to manage a checkbook. Right. And so
Mm.
that's embarrassing for me. But what I would tell Tyler is don't be slow to start managing money. Start from day one.
I love that. And yeah, could not agree more there. So final question, tips, tricks, hacks, or books you've come across in the last year that you would recommend to the listeners.
I have so many, and I just recommended these to my mastermind this morning. I lead a group called the Seller Roundtable for 7 to 8 figure Amazon and e-commerce brands. And the one that I just finished that was long as heck, but blew my mind was Benjamin Franklin's biography. Long listen or read. I mean, read it, listen to it at like 2.3 speed if you can get away with it. If you thought that guy had a fascinating life, it was even more fascinating. Another one this year, especially if you're
Mm.
looking for creativity ideas, a book called Storyworthy by Matthew Dix about how to cultivate narratives and tell stories is something I highly recommend. And the other one, Brene Brown wrote a book called Braving the Wilderness about authenticity and relationships. Highly, highly recommend Brene Brown's book.
Interesting. So I've heard of Dare to Lead. What's the difference between Dare to Lead and this other book you're mentioning?
Well, I think her message is in essence probably the same, like so many great authors. She uses the word braving as an acronym for I can't remember what the six letters stood for, but it really helped me as somebody who was trying to figure out how to just have higher EQ. By the way, this is what you're going to realize as you go from automate to that delegation world where Will's talking about, your ability to communicate clarity and to lead with empathy is going to be your bottleneck. It was for me. The difference in having $1 million and $10 million company is Tyler's ability to communicate my expectations and to build relationships that are truly authentic. And so, in general, I would just say Brene Brown's work is incredible in that regard.
Love it. And um how can our listeners get in touch?
This is like such a tricky question because we're laughing at this. We're almost an hour into this now, and I'm just saying this, but I sold my company about 3 months ago, and I'm finishing a sabbatical. You can definitely find me on LinkedIn. If you Google Tyler Jeffcoat, one F, I'm the only one. There's no only one of us misspelled Jeffcoat. It's me, right? So you're going to find me. I don't know what my next business is. I know that I'm going to continue leading my mastermind, but reach out to me on LinkedIn. I can't promise I'm going to be super responsive, but I will get back to you at some point. And yeah, I just appreciate you having me, Will. Always happy to chat with you.
Love it. That's it for our episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital. Over and out.